the radical, fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this Friday, April 11th. I hope everybody's having a fantastic week, which is about to end, and you're looking forward to a great weekend. I was going to go to the beach tomorrow. It's raining, though. Anyway, I just finished. The reason we're doing 4:15 is at 4 o'clock. I finished class number 1 of my course on capitalism that we're teaching at with Don Watkins. I'm teaching with Don Watkins, so we are teaching at the Ayn Rand University. So if you're not in Ayn Rand University, you're missing out. This will be a 32-hour, 16 sessions, each one 2 hours, delving deep into what is capitalism, what's the economics of it, what's the history, everything, right? Who are the defenders? Who are the opponents? What are their ideas? Everything to do with capitalism. Everything you ever wanted to know about capitalism, whether you were afraid or not to ask, will be answered in this course. So those of you not in ARU, you're missing out. The rest of you should sign up for ARU so you can take this in the future when we teach it again. Anyway, that was going on between 3 to 4 p.m. East Coast time. And now I am all yours. All yours until about 6 o'clock. So we've got about an hour, 45 minutes for today's show. Okay, just breaking news just now. This is the case of Mahmoud Khalil. Mahmoud Khalil, who was, as you know, arrested. Was it a month ago or so? He was the leader of the pro-Hamas movement at Columbia University. He led the demonstrations, the harassment, was involved in the takeover of the of the building, involved in the vandalism that occurred there. And he's a green card holder, so he's very close to being a citizen. He's a green card holder and was arrested for deportation about a month ago. And today, a judge ruled that she did not have the authority to stop the deportation. And that now it doesn't mean he's going to deport immediately. He will probably appeal this ruling. So he has until I think next week to file to request a stay of his deportation. Actually, he has until April 23rd to request a stay of the deportation and to appeal the ruling. Now, I did a show on this early on when he was first arrested, and I think I was under the false assumption that he had been basically arrested and was going to be deported because he had been involved in illegal activities and because he had expressed explicitly anti-American views that I think one could consider whether, and hatred for America, that one consider whether that would be appropriate for him to then become a citizen. And there were a lot of people who attacked his deportation and arrest on the basis of free speech. I mean, he has the right to have these views, and but so the question was it because of his actions, the harassment, the violence, really, the vandalism, and so on, or was it just because he had ideas? And I thought that it was because of the actions that he had taken. There are lots of people who hold the same ideas as he does that have not been deported. But it turns out I was wrong. It turns out that he was actually got an order for deportation based on a rarely used act, the McCarran-Walter Act, or the Immigration Nationality Act of 1952. And this act gives, this is a weird thing, it gives the Secretary of State, so in this case Rubio, the authority to decide that a non-citizen's presence in the United States threatens the country's foreign policy goals. Now that is just a weird characterization of what does that mean? What does it mean to threaten the country's foreign policy goals? In what way is that? Is that applied? So in this case, Rubio says the United States has a foreign policy goal to thwart anti-Semitism. And he is an advocate of anti-Semitism. Therefore, he's threatening our foreign policy goals, and he should be deported because of that. That seems to be a pretty convoluted argument. It seems to be a convoluted act. I haven't read the acts. I don't know exactly what it says, so we'd have to have a legal expert come on and tell us if this is actually what it means. What does it mean? Is there any kind of definition of foreign policy, a threat to foreign policy goals? It seems to give a lot of power to the Secretary of State to define foreign policy goals and then to go after people who they view as threatening it. Again, it doesn't apply to U.S. citizens, which is good. It does apply, though, to green card holders. I would rather just say that in order to become a citizen of the United States, you cannot hold ideas that make you explicitly an enemy of the United States. And supporting Hamas, I think, makes you explicitly an enemy of the United States. But nobody in this administration or any other administration would even know that. So it's complicated when we don't have a proper philosophy or proper ideas guiding our government. It's complicated when we don't have a clear definition of who our enemies are and what our interests are. All these things are complicated and become very dangerous vis-a-vis freedom of speech. I mean, look at that woman who was arrested, I guess, by masked men and thrown into an unmarked car in outside of Boston for writing an op-ed that, I mean, you could argue, maybe she threatens the country's foreign policy goals. Too ambiguous. It needs to be much more specific. A law like this is very dangerous and clearly can spill into being a threat to free speech. And look, individual rights are not only exist for citizens, they exist for all human beings. Even non-citizens, green card holders, even illegal immigrants. I know that is shocking, but even illegal immigrants have rights because they're human beings. I know that many people on the right have tried to dehumanize them in order to claim that they don't have individual rights, because they're not human after all. How could they have rights? But they actually, if they're human, they have rights, and therefore including the right to free speech, including the right to due process, including all those other rights. Anyway, it looks like Khalil's case will go to a appellate court, and we'll see what they rule and how they rule about it. But it could be that this act that they're using, that Rubio's using, it actually gives this authority to Rubio, and it could be that the courts have no authority to overturn it. I mean, they could declare the act non-objective, not specific enough, not clear, but that would require the courts to take a position which they rarely take in terms of trying to clarify a law. Okay, that was a late-minute edition. If we go back to the topic that's on everybody's minds, the economy, tariffs, and all that, I this morning you might have seen China imposed 125% tariffs on the United States in retaliation for the 145% tariffs that the United States has on China. The Chinese also announced that they would not be raising tariffs any more than 125%. And indeed, if the United States raised tariffs beyond what it has today, they should be the laughingstock of the world. So it does look like the Chinese are trolling the U.S. a little bit. while raising tariffs to match the United States, which makes them just as dumb as America. Well, not quite as dumb, but almost as dumb as the American government is. But anyway, basically what we're seeing here is, as we said yesterday, the decoupling of the two economies, the halting of trade between the two economies. Nobody's going to be paying 100% premium on the stuff they get from China, or 100% premium. Chinese are not going to buy stuff from America with 100% premium. So it basically is going to shut down trade between China and the United States, and the consequence of that are going to be interesting. We're going to be keeping an eye on that. But in the meantime, financial markets are behaving, let's say, strangely, but in a way that I think is consistent with a certain attitude towards America that's happening right now. And that is, by the way, the stock market was up 2% today, I guess because the Chinese said they're not going to raise any more than the 125. I don't know. I don't know why the market was up 2% today, but it was. But what was interesting in today, the last few days, is that interest rates were up again. So the 10-year bond was up. I think it was, what was it, over, let me just find it here. It was, it's at 4.49. So it's basically at 4.5%. Remember, it was down to below 3.9 at some point just last week. So it's been a huge increase in interest rates on the 10-year over just a few days. Some of the largest increases we've ever seen in history, or at least modern history, in terms of moves in interest rate. At the same, now, usually what happens, if when interest rates go up on a 10-year bond in the United States, usually the dollar gets stronger. Because why? Because people want to buy these bonds because they're getting a great yield on them. They're getting 4.5%, and that's better than they can get elsewhere in the world. So, and they need dollars in order to do that. So they go out and buy dollars, and then they go buy these bonds at these high interest rates. What's interesting right now is that the dollar is going down as interest rates are going up. The dollar is going down as tariffs are going up. Remember, I gave you the whole thing about why increasing tariffs increases the value of the dollar in normal times. What does this all indicate? I think what this indicates is that foreigners do not want to hold less dollars. They want to hold less dollars because they want to invest less in the United States. They're not buying our bonds. They're not buying dollars in order to invest in other American assets. They're selling dollars, and they're selling American bonds. What this basically is a expression of very low confidence in the U.S. economy, in the U.S. more broadly, in U.S. financial assets. The euro right now is above 1.13, close to 1.14. It was over 1.14 at some point, but it came down a little bit, but it's still very high. These are some of the highest levels they've had in 3 years. The dollar has lost about 5.5% of its value since so-called Liberation Day. We've also seen the pound sterling go up in value significantly. We've also seen the yen, the Japanese yen, go up a lot. Yen was at 160 to the dollar, and it's down to 143, I think, to the dollar. So all of this is indicative of the fact that even though people know they're going to be selling less to the United States and getting less dollars that way, they're not going out and buying dollars. They're not buying dollars in order to buy American bonds at 4.5%. There's a lot less appetite for dollars. Now, this is not the dollar collapsing. This is not the end of the world, not yet anyway. We'll see if it lands up being how bad it lands up being. But there's going to be a lot of hysteria out there about the end of the world. It's not. But it is concerning, and it is something to watch, and it is interesting because if you look at a graph of interest rates, as reflected by the 10-year, and a graph of the dollar, the value of the dollar versus a basket of goods, they usually track one another. And the idea that they're going in opposite directions is unusual, and again, something to be watched. And we'll see what kind of economic implications. I'll also add to this, which is consistent with the idea that the value of the dollar is declining in international markets, that gold is up. And you could think of gold going up, or you could think of the dollar in terms of gold going down. That is, it takes more and more and more dollars now to buy an ounce of gold, which means the value of the dollar is declining. It's declining vis-a-vis other currencies, and it's declining vis-a-vis gold. Now, I don't know if this is kind of the beginning of the end of the dollar as the reserve currency of the world, or the beginning of the end of the dollars as having significant value. The challenge I think people are going to have as they engage in this trade is, if they're not going to hold dollars, what are they going to hold? If they don't trust the United States anymore, who do they trust? Now, yeah, you can hold yen, and the Japanese government's pretty stable and consistent, but the Japanese economy is not growing. Do you really want to be investing in Japanese assets? Probably not. You can get the euro. Euro's pretty stable. It's going up in value right now. But do you really want to be investing in European assets? Germany is in a recession. Yeah, it's going to do this big fiscal stimulus. It's going to invest in its infrastructure, and if it's going to invest in its military. Is that going to create economic growth? Is that opportunities for investment? Not clear. It could be that after a while, in spite of all the problems, in spite of all the nuttiness, in spite of all the insanity, people come to the conclusion, in spite of everything, yeah, I mean, the United States is maybe just as bad or not as bad as the alternatives that they face. I don't know. But that is certainly a possibility of how a lot of this gets reversed, is that people realize that other countries in many ways are worse. I mean, one of the things that characterizes the United States is that often, in spite of the insanity, irrationality of its leadership, of its political leadership, its business environment, its entrepreneurial environment allows for many political mistakes, and somehow the U.S. economy still does okay in spite of all of them. Now, whether that happens now, I don't know, but it's always a possibility. So I'm not quite ready to be the guy who says, okay, it's the end of the U.S. economy. It's all doom and gloom now. We're finished. We're done. I don't think that's the reality. I really don't. But, as I said, something to watch. As part of talk about doom and gloom, we've talked about this before. I mean, it keeps coming up. Conservatives are obsessed by this idea. And this is the 1954 idea. So I guess in this case, it was David Assman, who is a host of shows on Fox. Indeed, I used to appear on his show all the time in the old days. Old days, I mean 2008 to 2012. We used to be very friendly. I used to be in a show all the time. And, he was on Fox, and he had this diatribe. And let me just read you a bit of what he said. He said, Americans used to live a lot better with a lot less than they do now. In 1954, with a yearly salary of $3,500, equivalent to about $40,000 today, a man could have a 3-bedroom house, a couple of kids, a wife who didn't work, a car, a TV. You try getting anywhere near having all that on just $40,000 a year today. And it won't happen anywhere in the United States. We have lost the value that used to make American dream real for American families. And Donald Trump wants to get it back. And he sees trade as a way of doing that. Now, put aside the fact the trade tariffs are only going to make it worse, to the extent that there's anything in what David is saying, it's only going to make it worse. It's going to raise the cost of living. It's going to make everything more expensive. It certainly has nothing to do with the cost of housing. I agree, the cost of housing is ridiculous today. But it's not going to do anything to the cost of housing. Tariffs are not going to do anything, right? But this is such an asinine argument. The whole perspective that we keep hearing, we used to hear it from the left all the time. The 50s were the best era because everybody was unionized. We had strong unions. Wages were up. People lived a good life. They could earn without having, without going into debt. And of course, they could have a wife who didn't work. I don't think the left ever made that argument, but the right makes it all the time because that's their ideal, right? But let's actually take a look at 1954. 1954. So first of all, we're talking about somebody earning the equivalent of $40,000 today. There were a lot of people earning $40,000 in the equivalent of $40,000 in 1954. A lot fewer today. A lot fewer. The mean and median wage, income, both household and individual, is much higher today than it was back then. So fewer people are in this category. Indeed, as I've argued over and over again, the only reason the middle class has been hollowed out is because so many in the middle class have become rich. The number of people earning over six figures is significantly higher today than at any point in time. In real terms, adjusted for inflation. So fewer people making the 40,000, many more people making six figures. That's the beginning of the fallacy. But beyond that, let's look at these homes that we're talking about that a family could afford back then. A quarter of homes in 1954, a quarter, 25% of all homes in 1954 had no flush toilets, had no showers or bathtubs. Half of all homes in 1954, half, lacked central heating. 27% of families had no cars. 27%. 33% had no televisions. We're not even going to dishwashers, washing machines, dryers. Almost nobody had those. I don't think washing machines were even dishwashers were even invented or certainly weren't prevalent. So, yeah, you could afford a small, the three-bedroom house was much smaller than a three-bedroom house today, by about 40%. So today, people live in much bigger homes. They have all these amenities they didn't have back then. All these amenities that make life so much easier. Now, granted, many of them don't have a wife that doesn't work. That amenity, many people have given up on. Maybe because women want to work. Maybe that's the reason. I don't know. Just a thought. Women want a challenge in their lives as well, and work is a challenge. And they go out and they want to be productive. In 1954, 34.4% of men whose wives were not in the labor force earned less than $3,500. So a third of women who stayed home didn't earn this much, and therefore couldn't afford all this stuff. And you could go on and on. They didn't have an internet. They didn't have Again, many households didn't have television. If they had television, it was black and white, and they had very limited channel choices. They didn't have Netflix. They didn't have Amazon. God, what are you talking about? I mean, you can talk about, on lots of different dimensions, you could look at the United States and say, maybe things were better in 1954. Maybe. But not on a material level. Overwhelmingly, it's not even close. Life is so much better today than in 1954 from a material perspective. I mean, cars didn't even have seatbelts. A lot more people got killed in car accidents. It's just, vacations. How many people went on vacations in 1954? And when they did go on vacation, it was somewhere close by. How many people flew in an airplane in 1954 to go on vacation? How many people went to Europe or Mexico or Latin America or Asia on vacation in 1954 as compared to today? Think about what airline prices, tickets were like. Much more expensive in 1954 than today. And by the way, flying was a lot riskier, a lot more dangerous back then than it is today. How many people went to nice restaurants? I'm not talking about fast food, which existed. How many people went to nice restaurants, not a diner, something a little bit better than Denny's back in 1954? Very few. I know growing up, we almost never went out to eat. And today, people go out to eat all the time. And how do I know this? Because I see how many restaurants are out there. Thousands and thousands and thousands of restaurants. They make a living somehow. Somebody must go and eat there. So vacations, restaurant, leisure, Netflix, internet, not to mention flushing, toilets, showers, bathtubs, heating, dishwashers, washing machines. And David is not an idiot.
And to them. So,
as I said, I know him. He used to have me on the show all the time. David Assman is not an idiot. But this nostalgia for the 1950s is insane. It is a lie. It is evasive. And it is just one more rationalization to say, this is the whole shtick of Donald Trump. Life sucks. It's terrible. Things are horrible, horrible, horrible. And the reason for that is trade with China and with Mexico and with Canada and with the European Union and with Singapore, which has zero tariffs and zero trade barriers with the United States, but now has to pay a 10% tariff. The evil, the reason things are so terrible today is because of illegal immigrants. The other countries, immigrants, they are the reason you are suffering. And hey, you're suffering. Wages are stagnant. You can't afford anything. Life was so much better in the past, particularly if you go back to the 50s. And that's what we should strive for. And the way to do that is to get rid of the other. We were great when it was just us. Who us is, I don't know. This is economic illiteracy. It's historically ignorant. It's historically stupid. But it's evasive because David knows better than this, and so does the host who interviewed David and could have made these comments to him. None of them. So just one other thing. Everybody talks about cost of housing, how cost of housing is terrible, and nobody can afford a house. But the reality is, more Americans own their home today than did in 1970. I have stats going down to 1970. I think that's 1970. Let me just enlarge this. No, this is going back to 1965. Sorry, 1965. So I have stats going back to 1965 on home ownership. And in 1965, 63% of Americans owned a home. Owned their own home. And the number peaked just before the great financial crisis because the American government dedicated itself to getting more people into homes. They subsidized it. They gave out ridiculous loans and everything, and it peaked at 68%, 9%, somewhere around there. And today, it's at 66%. So more people own their home today than in 1954. A larger percentage of the population owned it in 1954. So how can we can't afford a home? Obviously, people can. Maybe they can't afford the home they want. Maybe they can't afford the home in the location they want, but they can afford the home. People are living in homes that they own. More of them are living in homes that they own than did in 1954. Now, people are unhappy. There's no question people are unhappy. People feel miserable. They feel like something's wrong. And it is. Something is very, very, very wrong. But it's not that their material well-being is deteriorating. It's not that they make less money. It's not that they can't afford stuff. I've talked about this over and over again. Things are very, very wrong because they feel alienated from the culture, because they don't understand the world around them, because the mixed economy gives them mixed signals in terms of what they should aspire to. They feel terrible because we have an educational system that hasn't taught them to think for themselves, that hasn't taught them to be ambitious for themselves. We have an educational system that has dumbed them down. People feel miserable because politicians keep promising them things they can't achieve, that they will never get. And they feel disappointed because they promised me my steel job back, and it never has come back. People feel angry and upset and unhappy because of the mixed economy and because of the ideas that are prevalent in the culture, the cynicism and the skepticism, the lack of values, the lack of long-term thinking, the denigration of reason, the denigration of self-interest. That is why they're unhappy. You're not going to fix that with tariffs. You're not going to fix that with more mixed economy. You're not going to fix that by raising taxes on them. You're not going to fix that by deporting illegal immigrants. You're not going to fix that by going after China. You're only going to make it worse, much worse. Because right now, Americans are still rich. Yeah, everybody should read Nathaniel Banden's essay on alienation in, I think it's Capitalism, Not Known Ideal. And it's brilliant, and it's absolutely right, that essay. People feel alienated because they've been betrayed by their intellectuals. People feel alienated because of the mixed economy. And the mixed economy, not only in economics, the mixed economy of the soul. A mixture of Enlightenment values with primitive Christian values. We live in a culture that is rich, where people are rich, and they have no appreciation of it. They have no measure of it. They have no self-esteem and pride in it. They just have stuff, and they don't know what to do with it. And they long for a day, I don't know, 50, 60 years ago. But they have no idea why they long for that. Because somebody's created a mythology around it. Also, remember 1954 is an era of Jim Crow laws in the South. And even the North wasn't great about racism. You had redlining going on. We're talking about an era that was fairly racist in America. None of us should harken back to 1954 as a model for anything. It's disgrace and despicable that they get away with this. Again, right now, this is the richest time ever. From a material perspective, best time to be alive ever. For a values perspective, only if you have good values. Most people do not. Most people don't know where to find, quote, meaning in their lives. And our intellectuals are betraying them, and that's where the alienation comes from. And again, I recommend the essay, I think it's in Capitalism, Not Knowing the Deal, that Nathaniel Branden wrote, edited by Ayn Rand, about alienation. All right. So I wanted to say that about 1950. It keeps coming up, and it'll keep coming up. I mean, it's the rocking chair. What is it? Rocking chair conservatism. They just want the porch, rocking chair on the porch. They just want a calm life. They don't want to be. They don't want competition. They don't want to be challenged. They're not ambitious. They're not ambitious. They don't want ambition. This is sadly now characterizing the right. The right now is very much the same as the left. Oh, Ayn Rand wrote an essay about this. She wrote an essay about everything. The divine right of stagnation. They want the divine right of stagnation. But they want the divine right of stagnation with people who look like them. No immigrants, please, no immigrants. And no stuff made in China. China, it's far away and they've got slanted eyes. I don't want stuff from China. I just want American stuff. American. People like me, people who look like me. And says Thoreau and Billy Joel wrote about lives of quiet desperation. Yeah, and they wrote about it a long time ago. I mean, there's always lives of quiet desperation. Now, maybe there are more people who live lives of quiet desperation today than there are in the past. I'm not convinced of that. But today, the people with quiet desperation have a movement. It's called MAGA, that they can get behind. And they can take their anger and their frustration and their fear and use that to lash out at people who look differently from them. In the 50s, they did the same thing. They lashed out at blacks. Now, we lash out at immigrants and stuff made in China or Mexico or, God forbid, made in Canada, the real enemy. I mean, all of rock and roll is about rebellion and desperation, a rebellion against the system, wanting change. Yeah, because there is a real angst in the world. There's real angst. People don't understand the world because they don't have a guiding philosophy. That's the advantage we, some of us anyway, have. We have a philosophy. We understand the world. We don't need conspiracy theories. The world is very understandable once you have the right ideas. All right, another mythology out there that is just drives me nuts. I mean, again, I've talked about this. I keep repeating myself, but I've learned from the bad guys. You got to repeat yourself because that's how these ideas get they kind of sink in. If you just say them once and you assume everybody got it, you got to repeat. Okay, so over and over again, here's the quote from Trump, right? But this is not just Trump; it's his acolytes, it's his followers or zombies that mouth his stuff. They all mention this. For decades, our country has been looted, pillaged, raped, and plundered by nations near and far, both friend and foe alike. Our friends have been looting, pillaging, raping, and plundering us. I don't know if you noticed the hordes of people out there in the streets raping our women, plundering our homes, pillaging our, I don't know, whatever, right? This is happening. It's Canadians. They're all Canadians out there raping our women. Our women. I didn't know anyway, they're out there doing this. I mean, that is so, that's the voice of a demagogue. That's to incite fear and hatred. Only purpose of that. Fear and hatred. Now, he's using it metaphorically, right? He means through trade. We somehow rape. We're being raped through trade. So let's look at the world, right? The United States, I've got numbers here from 2006. The United States in 2006 constituted about 20 6% of global GDP. Like the wealth, you could say, of the world. The United States, in spite of having, I think, only 4% of the population, 26% of GDP in 2006. China, at the same time, had about 5% of GDP. China, during the last, 18 years, has gone from 5% of GDP to something like 17% of GDP. So China's gone up like this, huge. And if you view the world as a zero-sum world, which Trump does, winners, losers, it's all about, then you could argue that China has been pillaging, raping, looting from other countries because it rose like this in terms of the percent of GDP. And look, percent of GDP always adds up to 100. So they gain as somebody's loss. Somebody had to lose. So question number one was it the United States? And if you look at the graph, there was a period in which the United States, as a relative to the rest of the world, lost some GDP, went down from about 26% to about 21% in around 2011. You could argue most of that was because of the financial crisis. But since then, under Obama and under Trump the first time and under Biden, the United States today is back to 26% of GDP. So whatever percentages China took away from other countries, not the United States. So who got looted, pillaged, raped, and plundered? Well, Japan has gone from about 9% to about 7%. No, 9% to about 4%. So it's lost 5. Europe has gone from about 30%, was bigger than the US, to about 20%. So it lost about 10. So maybe they have something to complain about. But let's be very clear. Nobody's being looted here. The pie keeps getting bigger. The global pie is dramatically bigger than it was back then. And the share of it that China has is significantly larger than it was before because China has become richer by being more productive. The United States has maintained its share of global GDP by staying productive, growing in the economy steadily, not particularly fast, not in as good of a way as I would like to see them, but it's grown. Nobody's pillaged America. Nobody's looted America. Let me correct that. I'm sorry. Nobody outside America has looted, pillaged, raped, and plundered. If anybody has looted, pillaged, raped, and plundered, it's our government. They've looted, pillaged, raped, and plundered our wealth. We could be so much richer. We could be so much wealthier if they didn't loot, pillage, rape, and plunder. But that's us doing it to us. That would never be acceptable to Trump. It's always the other doing it to poor old us. Poor old America keeps getting looted, pillaged, raped, and plundered. And Trump will save us. This is the language, and I've talked about this since 2015. This is the language of authoritarianism. Scare the bejesus out of you. Tell you life sucks. You're being looted. You're being abused. You're being used. You're being raped and pillaged. And then telling you, it's not your fault that that's happening to you. It's the other. It's the Chinese. It's the immigrants. It's the Jews. It's the elites. It's somebody. And then what's the solution? Trust me. I know what to do. I will drain the swamp. I will get it done. I will deport the immigrants, and I will stop the Chinese by raising tariffs, keep them at bay. We need authoritarian Trump to come and save us all. What would we do without him? So no looting going on. The United States is not being looted, except by its own government. All right, quick one. DOGE update. We haven't had a DOGE update in a long time. We need a DOGE update. What's going on with DOGE? Have they reached $1 trillion yet? Anyway, yesterday, this video of this, it's actually a fascinating video. This video yesterday of a cabinet meeting that's open up to the press, right? So they have this section of the cabinet meeting, and it's open up to the press. And they go one member of the cabinet after another, and they each talk about their achievements. What they've done in the last week, month, whatever, right? Their big achievements. You got to watch this. I think every American has to watch this. Because it's eerily similar to what we see in places like Mao's China, Stalin's Russia, and the North Korea of today. Unbelievable. Every single one of these heads of departments in the US government starts out his comments by telling Donald Trump what a great leader he is. What a great man he is. How wonderful he is. I mean, I saw it once. I said, okay, this guy's sucking up to Trump. That's okay. Then I saw it twice. Then I saw it a third time. It's like every single one of them. It's like you have to first praise the supreme leader before you say anything else. He makes the sun rise. He makes whatever achievements you did possible. It's his greatness. It is so sickening. I couldn't believe it. I've never seen anything like it. So I encourage you to watch that and go see it for yourself. Don't believe me. Go see it for yourself. It's quite stunning. It's all over the web. You can find the video of this meeting. Anyway, it comes to Elon Musk, and he says something wonderful about Trump and how amazing Trump is and how he's the best thing to happen to the world or something or other. And then he says, which is interesting, we anticipate saving in FY26, that is the coming budget year, $150 billion from cutting waste and fraud. Huh. 150 billion. Okay. I thought he was going to cut 2 trillion. Well, that was super ambitious. So then he cut it back to 1 trillion. But I thought at least he'd do $1 trillion. Now, he's acknowledging publicly in a cabinet meeting in front of the press that for the next year, what they plan is, and we'll get to whether this is realistic, he plans to cut $150 billion. That's about 10% of what he promised. I seem to be doing this a lot lately, but I told you so. I told you DOGE couldn't do much. Anyway, $150 billion is respectable. It's not bad. By the way, on the website of the DOGE, it says that they've cut already $300 billion. So I don't know why Musk is being so humble and minimizing their achievements so much, right? Minimizing their achievements so much. But here's the interesting thing. If you look at government spending right now, and you look at month-to-month spending, from the day Donald Trump was inaugurated, and you compare it to the same period in 2024, right? Same 80 days or whatever it is, 90 days or whatever it is. The U.S. government over this period has spent $154 billion more in 2025 than 2024. Spending is going up. So even if billion, we're talking billion, not million, billion. So even if DOGE cuts $150 billion, they'd only get us back to 2024 numbers. And that's at best. Because as far as I can see, every month we're spending more than the previous month. So I don't see any cuts yet. Nothing real. Maybe they're cutting the rate of growth, but that's not cutting. That's the same cheating Republicans and Democrats have been doing for decades. We were promised real cuts, actual spending less money. That's what a cut means. That has not happened yet. It doesn't exist yet. Maybe they've eliminated some foreign aid, but at the same time, they've increased somewhere else. So overall, they're spending more money today than ever before. And the budget coming out of Congress is not a budget that cuts spending. Not $1, not 1 iota, not 1 cent. This is all smoke and mirrors, fake promises, economic amateurs, ignoramuses. They have no clue what they're doing. With all due respect to Elon Musk and Donald Trump and the rest of his cabinet, pathetic is the best way to categorize this government. Pathetic. On every front, foreign policy, defense, government spending. I'm still hopeful for regulations beyond, the showers, although showers are important, and I like, a real, what do you call it? A real shower, not versus the kind of trickle showers that we get. But anyway, that is the world in which we live. So DOGE, not much. Somebody did this exercise of saying, okay, what would a U.S.-made iPhone look like? What would it cost? And they went around, they asked experts. And basically the conclusion is, from most experts, is you couldn't do it. You just couldn't build an iPhone in the United States. Don't have the personnel, don't have the workers, don't have the factories. It's not easy to automate. The parts have to come from overseas. Okay, so if they're forced to project what a American-built, made-in-America iPhone would look like, and of course, even then, the components are not all American. We're just talking about assembly of the final components, right? Because you're not going to make the components in America. You can't mine the minerals in America. What would it look like? What would it be? I think some estimate that it's around $3,500. This cost $1,000? 3.5x. 3.5x. A $3,500 phone. That is a real reduction in your quality of life. A real reduction in your wealth. And even that is not all U.S. made. That's just whatever you can make in the U.S., made in the U.S. I mean, what Trump is liberating us from is our money, our wealth, and our freedom. It's a day of liberating us from freedom. There's a contradiction in terms, if ever there was one. All right. Supreme Court came down with a ruling a little while ago on the case of the guy who was deported to El Salvador, who was not a gang member and is not an illegal immigrant and actually has a court order saying he cannot be deported because of the risk of him going back to Venezuela. So this was, the judge said to let me back up. The Trump administration admitted that they made a mistake by deporting him. They admitted making a mistake. I mean, you can imagine how big of a mistake it must have been if they admitted it. Right? But then the judge in the case in the lower court said, okay, well, bring him back. Bring him back, right? You send him by mistake, correct that mistake by bringing him back to the United States. And the government said, no, we can't. We're not going to do it. We can't do it. This was appealed to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court unanimously There's a rare case for you. 9-0. 9-0. Even Judge Thomas voted for this. Basically ordered the Trump administration to bring Abrego Garcia back from El Salvador. The judge in the case now wants daily updates from the Trump administration on how it's going. And he wants a plan for bringing him back. No such plan has materialized. The government is delaying. They're saying, well, see, we'll get back to you. We need another week. We need another 2 weeks. Why can't they send an agent down to El Salvador, tell the El Salvadorians, whoops, sorry, we need Abrego back, and flying back to the United States? Why is this difficult? Maybe because they don't want him back in the U.S. to tell of the conditions under which he was held in El Salvador? Is he alive? I mean, who knows? Maybe they lost him. This is the administration that's going to make America great again. Good for the Supreme Court. 2 thumbs up to Supreme Court. 9-0. I love it. 9-0, and it's the right decision. It happens, and it should be celebrated when it happens. This weekend, the United States and Iran will begin direct negotiations. Direct. They're going to sit together. The foreign minister of Iran and Witkoff, the guy who's basically selling out Ukraine right now to the Russians. We'll get to that in a minute. They are meeting in Aden, I think. They're meeting somewhere in the Middle East to negotiate a deal. I think at this point it is pretty safe to say that I think there will be a deal. I think everybody wants a deal. Trump does not want to bomb Iran. He does not want to destroy their nuclear facilities. He doesn't want to be considered a war president in any kind of way. He wants a deal. And I think the Iranians, what do they have to lose? Their economy is destroyed. The economy is in real deep trouble. Indeed, from stories I've been reading, Khamenei did not want to negotiate with the United States, and his advisors basically said, look, if you don't negotiate, the economy's tanked, we will have a rebellion on our hands. You got to negotiate a deal. You got to open up the economy. The deal will be some promises that hopefully are stronger than the promises made to Obama in the deal Obama signed, not to develop nuclear weapons, maybe the destruction of whatever refined uranium they have today. Maybe, I mean, the gold standard would be the complete destruction of all the facilities that make it possible for them to refine uranium in exchange for complete opening up and elimination of all the sanctions on Iran. Maybe the Trump administration will try to throw in no support for terrorism. I don't know if the Iranians will go for that, and I don't know even if they went for it, whether they could be trusted. I know they can't be. But I think everything is in place for there actually to be a deal in place with the Iranians and the United States, in spite of all the threats from Trump. Israelis were confident that Trump would take out the Iranians or to let Netanyahu take out the Iranians. None of that is happening. It actually looks like a deal will happen. It won't be good. It'll just delay. Maybe during that delay, there will be a revolution in Iran. We can all hope. But of course, the probability of revolution declines if the economy there does better because of trade. Trade actually is a good thing. Sanctions, thus limiting trade, actually makes a country poorer because trade makes countries richer. Wow. Huh. Isn't it amazing how in some cases they understand that principle, in other cases they don't. It's just pretty amazing. Pretty amazing. All right. Finally, Witkoff is also meeting with the Russians. I think he's meeting with Putin today in continuing negotiations around a ceasefire in Ukraine. In the meantime, Witkoff is basically told, Witkoff is Trump's envoy to the conflict, has basically told Trump that the fastest way to get a ceasefire is to give Russia the 4 regions of Ukraine that Russia wants. Kherson, Zaporizhzhia, whatever that is, Luhansk, and Donetsk. Just give it to them. And if the United States forces Ukraine to give those regions to Russia, then there'll be a ceasefire. We'll call it a ceasefire. We won't call it surrender. Now note that 42% of Kherson is still under Ukrainian rule. 40% of Donetsk is still under Ukrainian rule. 30% of Zapo, whatever, is still under Ukrainian rule. And 2% of Luhansk is under Ukrainian rule. More than 1 million people still live in Ukrainian-controlled parts of these regions. And yet, what Trump's advisor to negotiating with Russia is recommending, this is the same guy who's going to negotiate with Iran. He's a great negotiator. The world class, the best, the humongous, the most exciting, amazing negotiator ever. Basically, what he's recommending is surrender. Imagine what he's going to recommend vis-a-vis Iran. Surrender 1 million people, 1 million Ukrainians to the Russians in order to achieve a ceasefire. Ukraine's not going to go for this. In particular now, Ukraine is doing fairly well on the battlefield. It still holds a part of the Kursk region within Russia. It has now started, invading another region of Russia, south of the Kursk region. There are Ukrainian troops in I can't pronounce it, Belgrade region of Russia. In Luhansk and in Donetsk, the Ukrainians are holding their own. So far, they have stopped the Russian advances. The Russians expected to have conquered much more territory than they have by now. The Ukrainians seem to be holding their own and actually making some advances in a few of those regions. And this is exactly the time where the Trump administration wants them to surrender. It really is disgusting, despicable. That's all I have to say about this administration. Disgusting, despicable. Except when they do the deregulation of the showerhead thing. That is cool. And the environmentalism and the energy. I'm very much pro all that. I think that's great. But the betrayal of Ukraine is something, and the coming betrayal of Israel is something as well. This Witkoff is, notice that there used to be another envoy to Ukraine that's been fired. There was even another envoy that did some negotiating with the Hamas who was fired. Everything is now Witkoff. Witkoff is now the #1 negotiator in foreign policy. It's not Rubio. Rubio's cut out of it completely. It's Witkoff. And Witkoff seems like a mini Trump. Like I'll sell my soul. I just deal. And zero sum. And zero sum here means Ukraine loses, Russia wins. By the way, a lot of talk now about economic cooperation between Russia and the United States. Although Trump did threaten that if Russia didn't agree to a ceasefire, he'd place more sanctions on them. You know what else he said today? Which was funny. I saw this video of him saying today, he was asked about Xi in China and about these tariffs and whether he was going to increase tariffs more than the 145%. He said, no, I'm not going to increase tariffs. He said, look, Xi is my friend. I like Xi. He said that. I didn't make it up. He said it. So he's disrespected America, but I like Xi. And we're going to do something. I mean, is there a dictator in the world anywhere? Any dictator? Any thug out there that Donald Trump does not like? Is not best friends with? Is not there's no bromance going on between them? And look, we knew this before he was elected. I told you. He loved dictators. He loves dictators. You still voted for him. First president who loves dictators. By the way, I'll just say this about negotiations. The Trump administration keeps saying 75 countries want to negotiate with us. But does the U.S. want to negotiate with them? I mean, about what? I mean, Singapore has 0 tariffs with the United States. The United States placed tariffs on Singapore. Israel now has 0 tariffs with the United States. The United States has tariffs for Israel. You remember the Trans-Pacific Partnership, the TPP, which basically reduced tariffs by 90% on Australia, Brunei, Canada, Chile, Japan, Malaysia, Mexico, New Zealand, Peru, Singapore, Vietnam, and the United States. And the United States backed out of it under Trump. Trump does not want zero tariffs. He does not want fair trade. He believes trade is zero sum. He believes right now it's we lose, they win. That's bizarre and ridiculous and stupid. And he wants to change it to win-lose. He does not want free trade. He does not want zero tariff trade. And there is no such thing as fair trade. Nobody can define what fair trade means. Nobody, ever. Does every country in the world have to have exactly the same taxes as the United States? Income taxes, sales taxes, estate taxes, capital gains taxes, dividend taxes, corporate taxes, in order for it to be fair? Does every single country in the world have to subsidize in exactly the same way as the United States subsidizes and the same industries for it to be fair? You can't define fair trade. The only standard for trade should be zero tariffs across the world. And lots of countries have offered Trump zero tariffs. And he's rebuffed them. He doesn't want zero tariffs. That's not the goal. There is no such thing as fair trade. You know what fair trade is? It's equity. You know how the left, the woke left, uses equity? And you can't define it? And you don't know what it is except to penalize some people at the expense of others? Fair trade is the same thing. There's no such thing as fair trade. There isn't. Trump hates trade, on principle, trade. But fair trade is like the left's equity. People talk about the woke right. And yeah, the right is adopting more and more and more of the left's terminology. By the way, fair trade is a terminology that was invented by the left, embraced by Bernie Sanders 2 decades ago, was a rallying call, even of Bill Clinton and kind of the people who rallied against the World Trade Organization in Seattle in 1999, all these far leftist antifa types. And now it's a term used by the right. The right is the left. The left is the right. They're the same thing. Trump is a leftist president. Maybe not on DEI, but certainly on trade, certainly in economics. He's a leftist through and through. I don't like the horseshoe theory because it's not a horseshoe. It's a line that splinters. There are lots of variations of collectivism. The right has always been collectivist, and there are all kinds of variations of collectivism of the right, all kinds of variation of collectivism of the left. But the arch is individualism, collectivism. That is the spectrum, political spectrum. And the right and the left are solidly collectivist. The right and the left today are solidly collectivist. And then there are a few of us over here who are individualists. And maybe there are a few who some of you consider centrists who are somewhere here along the line, a little closer to individualism than collectivism, but somewhere there. But the left and the right, this administration and Obama's administration, are all on the collectivistic side. There's no frigging difference between them. Biden, Trump, Obama, Kamala, they're all the same. They're all collectivists. All right. That, my friends, is, well, some of you are my friends. That is the news for Friday, April 11th, end of the week. We will have a show on Sunday. The show will be on why Trump is the worst negotiator ever. Trump, the worst negotiator ever. It's a sponsored show, anonymous sponsor. But why Trump is the worst negotiator ever, and we'll go through a bunch of examples, and we'll show what is the cause of that? Wow, we've got a lot of questions. I don't know if we're going to be able to get through all the questions today, again, because I have a hard stop. All right, let's jump into the questions, because otherwise, again, Ayn Rand Institute is a sponsor. Oh, yes, you can actually get a discount now on Ocon, 10% discount on Ocon, by using a discount code, especially for the especially for Ocon, for the listeners of the Yaron Brook Show. So here it is, 25 YBS10. So 25 YBS10. So if you go to Ocon and you register and you want a 10% discount, just put in 25 YBS10 and you get it. You can get the discount on an Ocon week pass, day pass, or, and this is great, a virtual pass. You know, you can watch Ocon from the comfort of your home via your computer, via the internet, and you can get now a 10% discount on virtual passes, 25 YBS 10. And then Alex Epstein, the best commentator out there on all things energy, including the Trump administration's approach to energy, all things energy, all things environmentalism, and all things climate change. Follow Alex Epstein, alexepstein.substack.com. His talking points, amazing. They will educate you and make you a better communicator about the value of fossil fuels, the value of industrialization. All right, let's jump in with questions, and I also have all the questions from yesterday. So again, if I don't get to any of the questions today, push them onto a Sunday. Probably no show tomorrow, although we'll see, but probably no show tomorrow. Okay, let's start with somebody did $100. Michael, not Michael, well, two Michaels. Michelangelo did a $100 question. Thank you, Yaron, for your generous time speaking to my law class last evening. Yeah, that was fun. The students were wholeheartedly engaged and interested. Yet another stellar YB appearance. Hope this helps with our trade deficit. Thank you, Michael. Really, really appreciate it. I enjoyed it. It's a law class in a law school. It was a class on property rights, and we talked about why all property should be privately owned. And we talked about more broadly capitalism. It was a lot of fun, and they had a lot of questions, and they were you could tell they were a little shaken up, and some of them took a lot home to think about. Okay, Remo, will the sovereign wealth fund be the final nail in the coffin of capitalism? I cannot think of anything worse than the U.S. government holding equity positions in firms. Is it possible that it will be ruled unconstitutional? It would be ruled unconstitutional. Is it the death nail in capitalism? I don't think so. It's one of the many nails that go into slowly the demise of capitalism. I've said many times that I think a sovereign wealth fund for America is one of the worst ideas ever. It's an awful, awful, awful idea. Is it the end of the world? I don't know. I don't think so. I think there are many other bad things. Would it be ruled unconstitutional? I can't really think of on what basis it would be ruled unconstitutional. So I find it hard to imagine how and what the basis for it would be. It should be ruled unconstitutional, but I'm not sure how. I'm not sure on what basis. It's just ridiculous, both because of the ownership of equity, the government owning private companies, but also because we're running massive deficits. You want to enlarge the deficit so the government can go and take control of a private industry? Horrible, horrible, horrible idea. Martin asking the same question over and over again in the chat will not help you. If you want to ask a question, the super chat is available. But if you continue like this, I will just block you from the channel. So stop it. It reduces the likelihood I will answer. So if you're interested, ask the question in super chat. But behaving like that, flooding the chat with the same question, not cool, guys. Not good, not right. Not fair to everybody else in the chat. And if you want to ask a question, I answer all questions when they're asked in the super chat. And you can put $2 in, so it doesn't even have to cost you that much. Anybody can afford $2. Wes, thank you. Remo, thank you for the question. Wes, thank you for the $50 sticker. Really, really appreciate that. And I'm sure there have been other stickers, but I don't know. Thank you, Barbara, for the sticker. And maybe there haven't been that many stickers. Okay. All right, Remo also asks, oh no, we've got Michael comes first. because Michael did $50. Michael, all these leftist protests against Trump are not about tariffs. They're about this perceived cuts to social services. I wonder if the left secretly likes these tariffs. Trump has done far more to cripple business than Antifa rioters ever could. That's absolutely right. And look, I mean, people like Bernie Sanders have always advocated for tariffs. They've always been strong advocates for tariffs. So absolutely, it is interesting. All right. So it is consistent with their ideas. You know, they can't really protest it because they believe in it. Now, some people on the left are anti-tariffs. I mean, Clinton, even Obama and Biden were anti-tariffs. Or no, Biden wasn't. Biden kept all the Trump tariffs. So the more centrist Democrats, the more center-left Democrats are anti-tariffs, but the far left is very pro-tariffs. And yes, Trump has done a lot to hand over to the Democrats not only the potential of winning, which seemed like they would never win again, but he has increased the possibility that they win, but also given them real issues and gone after business for them and is helping wreck the economy, which is what they have always wanted to do. All right. Let's see. Thank you, Michael. Remo, I will never be able to thank you enough for the influence you've had on my life. Thank you. I appreciate that. You not only changed it, you probably saved it. Thank you for everything you do and for incredible person you are. Thank you, Remo. Really, really appreciate that. Thank you, guys. Really appreciate it, Remo. Really appreciate it. All of you. Expressing thank you is an important act of justice, and I really appreciate that. Hopper, I tend to think the right is more effective at draconian statist policies, but maybe they're just louder. I think the right is more effective, but maybe they're just louder. Obama did it quietly through the bureaucracy. Being quiet isn't necessarily less effective at being destructive. I think Trump is more destructive not only because he is louder, you're right, but he's also more destructive because he has the audacity. He really doesn't care about the Constitution, about the courts, about his own party will just roll with whatever he does. He just has more audacity than anybody else. I think other presidents would have been hesitant. He has no hesitancy. No hesitancy whatsoever to just do crazy things. And that gives him the ability to impact policy much more than they did. Obama's main evil was Obamacare. And he did a bunch of other things through the bureaucracy that were bad. A lot of that, some of that was undone by Trump 1. Biden did a lot of things through the bureaucracy that hopefully will be undone by Trump 2. But Trump is then doing things that are not undone by the left because they agree with him, like tariffs, like trade restrictions. James, Trump lies in ways that are clearly not meant to successfully deceive anyone. This is true. It doesn't matter when you're a game show host, but when you bring it into government, this is why people are worried about fascism. This is Sam Harris. I agree with Sam. I mean, Sam's criticism of Trump is spot on. I find very little to disagree with Sam Harris's comments on Trump. Generally, I like Sam Harris, and I agree with him on a lot of things. I disagree with a lot of things, but I agree with him on a lot of things, and I like the way he presents his cases when he does present them, and I think his case against Trump is solid and true. I agree with it. Liam, MAGA wants a divine right to make a living without thought. They want the 80% of us in the economy to subsidize the 20% of those who can only intellectually perform the job of digging ditches, mining for coal, or farming. Yeah, maybe. I wouldn't denigrate people mining for coal. That's a tough job. But yes, they want the right of stagnation. The right of stagnation requires massive subsidies for those who are most productive to those who are least productive. They want their pensions guaranteed. They want Social Security enlarged and enhanced. They want ultimately, just like the left, they want their health care provided by government. So, yeah. That is MAGA. Mindless. And they want to be rewarded for it. Andrew, I think many baby boomers seek the feeling of safety they felt as children in 1954. Why so worried now? It's not that the facts of reality are creating a sense of danger. It's their philosophy creating cognitive dissonance. Yes, I think it's their philosophy creating cognitive dissonance. I don't think it's a feeling of safety when they had children. I think that's way too psychologizing. I'm a baby boomer. I don't remember feeling safety maybe because I grew up in Israel. But I don't think it's psychological in that sense. I think it's alienation. I think it's a feeling of angst, a feeling of frustration that they feel, a real feeling of frustration and angst that they feel around the world that exists today. It's cognitive dissonance resulting from altruism, from guilt, which is caused by altruism, from bewilderment about the state of the world, not understanding the world, not understanding what's going on, living a pretty good life, but not having the ability to appreciate that life because of their conflicting philosophical premises. So it's not even like they have a coherent philosophy. If they had a coherent philosophy, they would have some way to understand what's going on. They don't have a coherent philosophy. They have a mishmash, a philosophy full of contradictions would create the alienation, the contradictions in their mind. Andrew, could it be that your resistance to repeating yourself is holding back your show's success? Objectively, you're saying many interesting, radical, and fundamental things that an audience would want and need to hear repeated. Andrew, I think you're right. I think I'm buying into this idea that I need to repeat more. I need to be more, like, I'm bored with going after Trump. Like, I'm bored with it. It's actually quite boring. But when I do it, viewership goes up. Everybody wants to talk about, like, another show on tariffs. Yeah, you guys want that. Maybe not some of you, but some of you really want it because that's the numbers show that. So maybe that's what I need to do. I need to repeat more, go after the same issues that seem to interest people, hammer at them, and whatever's top of the news, keep going after the things that are top of the news. So we'll see. We'll see if that's the case. RY38, it's very frustrating how so-called believers in capitalism on the right will not stand up to Trump and tariffs. Thank you for being the voice of reason these crazy days. Thank you, RY38. Yes, it is. Remember, conservatives were never pro-capitalist, or at least most of them were never pro-capitalist. At the end of the day, you cannot be religious and consistently pro-capitalist. Something has to give. And whenever the rubber hits the road, whenever it comes to actual policies, they abandon their capitalism very, very quickly. Very, very quickly. So that is the fundamental problem. The problem is that they weren't ever really believers in capitalism. Anybody who is somehow pro-tariffs today never believed in capitalism. It was always superficial. It was always, I don't know, just pretend. Okay, Martin, you've asked the question a million times. Relax, you'll get an answer. Chill, man. But, repeating stuff on the chat, not good. Doesn't put you in a good light. I appreciate that you did a super chat and you did your first super chat ever. That's great. Andrew, do you make a connection between Trump punishing his political enemies, his loyalty tests, and the paranoia that dictators tend to suffer from? Why do you think dictators tend to be paranoid? Well, because the whole nature of their dictatorship is the imposition by force, the recognition of force as a means by which leadership is determined. And therefore, by the fact that they're dictators, they, in a sense, have legitimized anybody from bumping them off, from challenging them, from using force against them. So they are unbelievably paranoid. I mean, Nikos, when we have Nikos on again, we'll ask him about this. Stalin was like unbelievably paranoid. He was constantly looking over his shoulder, constantly killing people because he was afraid that they were scheming to undermine him, to get rid of him. Remember, these people have very low self-esteem. This is why they revert to force. Trump has very low self-esteem. He has this pseudo-fake self-esteem, which is his bravado. But there's no real self-esteem. He doesn't really believe that he deserves what he has, that he belongs where he is, that he is compatible with reality and nature and the world. The world is against him. So he's constantly worried about being undermined, being questioned. And anytime anybody disagrees with him, it undermines his sense of self. It undermines, because he's not a reasoning being. Like a reasoning being, a rational being, thinks, okay, if somebody disagrees with me, they're either right or wrong. If they're right, then I'll learn something from them. And if they're wrong, why do I care if they criticize me? Right? That's the rational attitude. But if everything you base is on whim, you're not secure in your beliefs, you don't really have them grounded in a reality, then everybody who criticizes you is a threat. It's their emotion versus your emotion. And all that matters is not loyalty to reality or the Constitution or facts or logic. It's loyalty to you. And if you're not loyal, you're a threat. And you could use force to undermine me. So they're all paranoid. And Trump is super. It's the only thing that matters to him is loyalty. And punishing his political enemies, it's exactly right. He's, again, and he envies the dictators who can do it in a much more serious way. All right, I am going to start now with yesterday's questions. We'll do these, although Alexis just asked a $20 question, so let me go with Alexis. Alexis says, please spare a thought for the miserable financial market professionals who are wondering how they could possibly do 45 more months of this president-induced market madness. Alexis, volatility is your friend. You should be raking it in right now with this volatility. I'm kidding. Yes. I mean, as I said yesterday, remember, I don't know if you heard the show yesterday, Alexis, but we cut out this chunk of content from it where I talk about how destructive tariffs are for the individual businessmen, people who work in businesses, how all their work designing the supply chains and building those supply chains is just gone up in smoke. And financial professionals who are trying to invest money in ways that provide a return to their investors, but in ways that make sense based on analysis of the economy and of asset prices. And then every day, some ignoramus is just, randomly injecting force into the equation and causing volatility, and you never know in which direction it's going to go because you never know what exactly he's going to do. One day he does something bad, the next day he rescinds it, then he doubles up on the bad thing. And Alexis says it's exhausting. It's definitely exhausting, but it's also, ultimately, it's very difficult to make money in an environment like this because it's arbitrary and random, and it throws an element of force into the mechanism of distribution of capital, which the market is responsible for, financial markets are responsible for. It makes financial markets less efficient, less effective, and it makes the job of the professional miserable. Even if and even when they're making money, which many of them probably are. Michael says, this is from yesterday, the nationalism and tribalism of today might not be as strong as it was in 1920s Germany. This may be a temporary backstep. A lot of maybes there, Michael. And maybe, I agree, it might not, it may be, it's all true, I don't know, but it looks bad. It looks bad. And here's the differentiating, here's the thing that makes me really worried. Leonard Peikoff talks about this. He says, he describes what is going to happen, and he says, look, for this to happen, there has to be an intellectual class who is driving towards this. In other words, he says the right has to develop an intellectual class that believes in this stuff and is teaching and advocating for this stuff. You can't get it, the nationalism and tribalism, without an intellectual class. And on the left, we've always had it, but if we're going to get authoritarianism from the right, he says the right doesn't have it yet, and it would need to have it in order for it to win, in a sense. Well, now it has it. Now it has it. It definitely has it. It has it in the national conservative movement. It has it in the Christian conservative movement. It has it in the integralist movement. It has an expansive number of right-wing intellectuals who are advocating for one form of authoritarianism or another. So, and nationalism is at the heart of it all. So, and there's nobody else on the right. Then there's just the left, which is authoritarian in a different way. So I just don't know how you get out of this. But maybe it's just temporary. Maybe. All right, Einvid, and I think this also answers the question by what is the name, Martin, who did do a, Martin Thomas, who did do a sticker. It was his first ever sticker, so congratulate him on that. So this will answer his question as well. Ovid says, Douglas Murray versus Dave Smith, a debate on Rogan. Murray, not at his best, still dismantling Smith, and to some extent also Rogan's choice of guest worth a watch. I watched parts of it. I can't watch the whole thing. It's like I can't watch Rogan. I don't like him. And Dave Smith is just so despicable, so disgusting, such a dishonest nothing. He's really dishonest. He's evasive and dishonest, and I can't stand the guy. So I find it very difficult to watch. But I did watch parts of it. And look, Douglas Murray is great. I think you're right. He's not at his best, partially because Dave Smith is such a weasel, and partially because it's Rogan, and maybe there's a certain intimidation factor with Rogan because of who Rogan is and the size of the audience. But the segments I saw, I thought Dave was pathetic, and Douglas Murray was good. It was not great, but good. And Douglas has a way of dismantling Dave's arguments that are unique to Douglas Murray, and because he's very articulate, he's very smart, he has ways to say things and that I think connect with people. He's very good in Israel. And so, yes, I again, the parts I watched, I haven't watched the whole thing. Probably you will never watch the whole thing. Douglas Murray, look, if I had to choose between Douglas Murray and Dave Smith, there's no competition. I'm on Douglas Murray's side all day long, and we disagree on a bunch of things. But I disagree with Dave Smith on a lot more things. So even though Dave Smith is a libertarian, I consider him much more of an enemy to me than, call it, conservative Douglas Murray. I think Dave Smith is a terrible intellectual and a despicable human being, and anarchy to be the opposite of capitalism and the opposite of freedom. And he represents that, so he is on the side of the authoritarians. And that's true philosophically, and it's true politically. So libertarianism is not close to objectivism. In many cases, like with anarchists, it's the exact opposite of objectivism. It's the furthest removed from objectivism. All right, Michael, maybe it was unrealistic of us to assume we could overthrow 2,000 years of altruism, collectivism, and skepticism only 3 generations after the publication of Atlas Shrugged. Who assumed that? I didn't assume it. I've never assumed we could overthrow it. It's going to take a long time. It's way too early. And Ayn Rand said it was way too early. And Leonard Peikoff said it's way too early. David, whoever was asking about switching from law to actuarial work, this is yesterday or the day before. A lot of actuarial work is legal wrangling with regulators and lawyers, so a lawyer is good for that. So yeah, but it's also very mathematical, so you need the specialized training as well. But yeah, I think lawyers are well suited if you can do the math. It's very mathematical. Thank you, David. Asmund, how does one most effectively pivot from being businessman to an intellectual promoting objectivism? Thoughts on formal education? I think the number one thing to do is join the Ayn Rand University, start taking classes, start getting known by the intellectuals at the Institute, really do a deep dive into objectivism through ARU. And I think that's the pivot you have to make. At ARU, as part of that, you'll get advanced training to become an intellectual. I'm actually engaged in a seminar just for that, how to get these intellectuals to become public intellectuals. You'll start writing and speaking and all of that. So ARU, that's the path to take. Michael, are you concerned your entire stock portfolio could be wiped out and you won't be able to retire? No, I'm not concerned that my entire stock portfolio is going to be wiped out. The wealth of America is not going to be wiped out by Donald Trump. So no, I'm not worried about that. And who wants to retire anyway? I mean, I need to keep my mind going. You guys are what keep my mind going. I can see myself doing this well into my 70s, hopefully into my 80s. Maybe not 3-hour shows every day or 2.5-hour shows every day, but maybe, 2 shows a week or whatever, something, and maybe some travel and some speaking. I do expect to slow down, but I don't expect to go to zero, hopefully. I mean, at some point, maybe my mind won't go. Maybe my mind will stay as sharp as it is. I mean, look at Milton Friedman. I think his mind stayed sharp well into his 90s. That's my goal. Esoteric dichotomy. Hey, Yaron, if the U.S. replaced all taxes with a flat consumption tax, wouldn't it still have to be high to tackle the debt and entitlements? Yeah. I mean, as long as the U.S. government spends all the money it spends today, it would have to be very high. It's better to have a high consumption tax than and no other taxes than the myriad of taxes we have today. So it would have to be consumption tax replacing all taxes, corporate taxes, wealth taxes, inheritance taxes, capital gains taxes, dividend taxes, income taxes, all of them gone, just one tax. It would be amazing even if it was very, very high. And then start shrinking government. Ultimately, you have to shrink spending. Andy, I actually have a lot of faith in the courts. Hopefully, no matter what happens, they weigh in on Congress surrendering its power to the executive thoughts. I hope you're right. I'm not convinced. The days I'm more positive, the days I'm more negative, we'll see. It's going to be interesting. Clearly, this court is antagonistic to the administrative state. Whether they are antagonistic to executive power and the ability of Congress to delegate power to the executive, I just don't know. It'll be interesting to ask one of our legal experts, and I'll do that when we get back to interviews. By the way, on Monday, I'm interviewing Christina Laporte. Christina Laporte is an author of thrillers with a medical twist. She's a cardiologist. And I find out, I think the main thing we're going to talk about is, God, how did she become an author? And the books are good. Not Victor Hugo or Ayn Rand, but they're good. They're thrillers. And they got a real publisher, and they sell in real marketplace out there. So we'll be talking about her thrillers, and we'll be talking about her becoming an author, and her going. She became a doctor late in life, and became an author of novels even later in life, and that's just amazing to me. So we'll talk about that. That is Monday. I think it's 7 p.m. Eastern Time. All right, Ryan, could we see the Supreme Court weighing in publicly on executive power? Oh, that's a similar question. They surely must have a role in defending the Constitution, even when cases are not being advanced for every order. Yes, I think we will see them. I think it will advance. It will go to them. They'll have an opportunity. I hope they will in the right way, but I'm not convinced they will. I'm not convinced they will. All right, we still have about 20 minutes. We can go. All right, esoteric dichotomy. Hey, Yaron, how can we get society off of the anti-intellectualism so many people seem to glorify lack of expertise? Experts in fields are important. Yeah, very important. The only way to do that is through education. We need to dramatically improve education. We need to get people thinking. We need to get people to actually think for themselves. And I think thinking people value expertise. And then we need to, in some fields, we need to replace the experts with actual rational experts. There are fields, public policy, economics, where the experts are not good and shouldn't be listened to. Most of the experts, not all of them. Some of them are very good. That doodle bunny, how exactly is this any different from the rise of Hitler? It's not in essentials. The only difference is this is America, not Germany. That is, Americans will be more resistant to a Hitler than Germans were. There's also one other difference, which is important. There's another difference that is important. Hitler was an ideologue. Hitler actually believed in something evil, but he believed in something. He wrote a book with his beliefs in it. He practiced those beliefs, and he executed on those beliefs, and he was consistent with those beliefs. Trump believes in nothing other than his own whims and power. So, and I think that's a significant difference. It's very difficult to become a dictator and to convince people to rally the country and to dominate the country when you believe in nothing. I fear, as I've said in the past, the more intellectual Trump, the J.D. Vance, the Josh Hawleys of the world, who believe in something and who are ambitious when it comes to their authoritarianism. They scare me more than Trump. Raphael, in your hierarchy of values dynamic, is your hierarchy of values dynamic depending on context? Your children are high value, but sometimes you might prefer going to the cinema instead of staying with them. How should we think about that? Yes, absolutely. Your values are always contextual. They're contextual to what you're doing right now. Your central value is your work, but that doesn't mean every single moment of your life you're working. You also have to have time for leisure. Your children are very, very high value, but not at the expense of your sanity. So you've got the hierarchy of values gives you a framework, but then it depends when and in context different values are pursued. And it's not rigid. I mean, your children also become, when they leave the house, it's different than when they're completely dependent on you. So everything is dynamic over time, dynamic over space, depending on what's going on in your life at that particular moment. That doesn't make them subjective. The methodology is always the same. It's always rational, and it's always guided by the needs of your life, the requirements of your flourishing. Right? So it's always objective. And objectivity means attuned to the context. That doodle bunny, they never shut up about the greatest generation, but the generation died to stop what Trump is. That generation died to stop what Trump is. Yeah, and they vote for him, although the greatest generation is a shrinking generation very, very fast. But I'll also say this about the greatest generation. Yes, they fought fascism, but they also brought us the welfare state. They brought us Medicare and Medicaid, and they brought us Social Security, and they brought us statism. So, and a solid mixed economy. So while they should be celebrated for fighting World War II, they should also be condemned for their political philosophy, which was basically anti-American. Michael, I do think MAGA will become extremely unpopular over the next 4 years as people savings get wiped out and Trump's statist lurch becomes more random and devastating. Well, I mean, you don't know. Who knows what's going to happen over the 4 years? Your savings might not get wiped out. The stock market could reverse because Trump could moderate his positions and back off of tariffs, and all the deregulation will kick off, and a lot of other things will happen. I mean, we can't be overly negative in the sense of projecting what's happened in the last couple of weeks onto the next 4 years. I just don't think that's right. And then the question is, if MAGA becomes unpopular, what replaces it? And so we don't know. This is part of the problem with the Trump. We don't know. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know how he's going to respond. A lot can happen in the next 4 years that could support MAGA, it could hurt MAGA. Hard to tell. Liam, was Herbert Hoover a strong man, quasi-fascist like Trump? Weren't his tariffs far more ruthless than Trump's? I don't know if he was quasi-fascist like Trump. I don't think so. I don't. I think FDR was much more quasi-fascist like Trump than in a sense of not caring about the Constitution than Hoover. Hoover's tariffs were not more ruthless than Trump's. Not if you take Trump's reciprocal Liberation Day tariffs. Those were worse than Hoover's. The 10% tariff is lower than what Hoover did. So, but Trump's were as bad as Hoover's in his intent, maybe not in the ultimate execution of them. Not your average algorithm. If Trump disregards the Supreme Court order, is it time for civil disobedience? Should objectivists take to the streets? It could very well be, but again, civil disobedience, you want to engage in it when there's something to be achieved. There's somebody you're talking to. So whether objectivists should go into the streets, I mean, what is it, the 100 of us? What are we going to do in the streets, and who's going to pay attention to us? So you have to really think about when is civil disobedience appropriate? What point are you trying to make, and can you make the point given how small we are? None of those are trivial questions to answer. Hector, you can still afford a nice big house, and it's affordable. The states are like Iowa, Missouri, Idaho, Dakota. I would add Alabama, Mississippi, even Tennessee. Nashville might be expensive, but other parts of Tennessee are not that expensive. Texas, particularly if you're willing to live in Houston or willing to live in, I don't know, if you want to go to the Panhandle in Houston, you can get cheap housing. I'd say 90% of America, in terms of geographic space, housing is very cheap. It's very cheap. Yeah, California is expensive. New York's expensive. Austin is fairly expensive. But not the rest of the country is not. Neo, awesome Obama analysis video you made 7 years ago. Oh, God. I'm sure there was an awesome Obama analysis I did 7 years ago. I can't remember it. But everything is on YouTube, so you can find it if you're interested. But I did do some awesome Obama stuff years and years ago. What does it mean for a person, this is Action Jackson, for a person to have class? Should one aspire to be a classy person? I don't know. I think it comes from the idea of upper class, of having style in how you dress and how you behave and how you conduct yourself. I think there's something there, but I doubt that. Yeah, I don't consider myself a classy person. I don't strive to attain class. I just aspire to be a decent, polite, nice, but also effective human being. And all within the concept of selfish. Dignity is important, I think, but I'm not sure class is. I mean, to me, it isn't. I think to other people it is. It's why I don't like aristocrats. They're classy, but it's in a superficial kind of way. I don't know. So my view, no, but you'll probably get different answers if you ask other objectivists. Enric, we came to San Jose, California in '63 with little from Romania. In a year, we had a car and a home. There was racism, but a lot less regulation raising all prices. Yeah, but if you came from Romania today and you got a job in San Jose, California today, your quality of life would be a lot higher than yours was in '63. A lot fewer regulations in '63, and home prices were lower, but most of the regulations on home prices are unique to San Jose and California. As we said, you can still buy the same kind of house, even bigger, significantly bigger, at the same price, basically, in other places in the United States. I still think that in spite of all that, an immigrant coming to America today faces a much higher standard of living than you did in '63. And there's plenty of jobs. Andrew, I believe Rand wrote her notes that epistemology was devolving into word games with words only connoting a vague haze of something real. That's a good intellectual breeding ground for liars. Yes, and for liars, but also for just people who can't think. Thinking requires concepts and requires knowing what the concepts mean. And if you don't know what they mean, if it's just fuzz, then your thinking is fuzz. And then it's not just that you're lying, it's just that you don't know anything. You're just fuzzy. And I think that's the state of the world, full of fuzziness. All right. Hopefully, I think we're going to be able to get through all these questions. Subkaski. Why do advocates for liberty like Millet and others always end up citing and appealing to nationalistic right-wing types, misguidedness or ignorance? I think it's somewhat political reality in the sense that a place like Argentina, the only possible allies Millet could have on the kind of conservative nationalistic right. I also think that Rothbard and his type of libertarians, the anarcho-capitalists, funnily enough, have a certain affinity with the right, because as I said, at the end of the day, the anarchists are authoritarians, and there's something about the nationalistic right, and it's kind of authoritarian bent, and it's xenophobia, and it's religiosity that appeals to them, and so I think that's part of it. So it's misguided ignorance, but it's also evasion. I mean, Millet is Red Rand. So it's ignoring the better ideas and engaging with the bad ideas. Apollo, do you have an opinion on Puerto Rico's political landscape? Not really. It's basically a lot of Puerto Ricans are very left, and the rest are kind of just middle of the road. And I think we have a governor and everything that are pretty middle of the road. And it doesn't really seem like the Puerto Rican landscape is moving in a positive direction, but it's not collapsing either. It's just status quo, keeping the island afloat. Holden says, I asked a number of Trump voters how they would rate Trump for his performance thus far. The average answer was about an 8 out of 10. God, that is pathetic. That is so pathetic. But this is the thing. Trump zombie syndrome. It's real. It's a real phenomenon. And most Trump voters have it to some extent or another. Some of them have full-blown zombie syndrome. Some of them have only mild Trump zombie syndrome. But they all have it to some extent. Steven says, you don't like the way economics is taught, but what about corporate finance? What's the best way to learn corporate finance? Corporate finance is pretty good. The best way to learn it is get a good corporate finance book. Read Michael Jensen, who's very good on corporate finance. Study the history of corporate finance. So I think there are a lot of books. And if you're in a finance program, you'll probably get a decent education in corporate finance. It's much healthier than economics because it's much more connected to the real world. Martin, Nick Fuentes has 500,000 followers on X Thoughts. We live in a pathetic, ignorant, mindless culture. That's a culture that follows Nick Fuentes. So Nick Fuentes is one of the most horrible people in America today. Evil, little, nothing. He's a nothing. He knows nothing. He's obnoxious. He's stupid, and he's ignorant. And he's got an evil philosophy. And yet he has 500,000 followers. It tells you that America is not in good shape. Holden, how can I convince my econ club of laissez-faire capitalism? I'm not skilled at speaking or persuasion. I'm much better at economic theory. Take ARU's course on on capitalism. You will learn everything you need to learn about laissez-faire capitalism. But there's no silver bullet. You just have to be a good communicator, and you have to convince and try to persuade and present the argument, both moral and practical. Show them the history. Get my book with read Capitalism, Not Knowing the Deal if you haven't. Read my book with Don on free market revolution. Watch my talks on capitalism and do the best that you can. Stephen, do you think true nihilists exist? Is it possible to be a nihilist without knowing it? Yeah, most nihilists don't really think it through and don't know it. Yeah, people, some of the Antifa people, some of the MAGA people are clearly true nihilists. They just want to see it burn. They just want to see it destruction. They get, I mean, a lot of criminals are just nihilists. They don't do the crime for anything other than to see it burn, to see the suffering. Stephen, what do you think of AP exams? Consider AP Economics and Environmental Sciences. I think at least some of these courses teach propaganda. Yeah, I mean, not propaganda. AP Economics is worth taking, but you're going to learn a lot of crap in it, a lot of nonsense. Certainly AP Environmental Science is probably a lot of propaganda. But AP Economics, there'll be good stuff there and there'll be bad stuff there. And you just have to read enough good economists to be able to differentiate between what is what. Finally, Michael, what does Trump think he gets out of imposing huge tariffs with deregulation? He hates trade. He really truly believes trade is bad. It's evil. He's always believed this. He's always thought this. Trade deficits are bad. Trade is zero sum. And the person sending the money is the loser. He believes that. So he thinks tariffs will fix that. They won't, but that's a factual issue. He doesn't know. He really hates trade. He really is a zero sum. And he thinks deregulation will create economic activity. He holds both of those. He's a man who holds lots of contradictions because he's not a thinker. He's not rational. He's not connected to reality. That opens him up to lots of contradictions. All right, guys. I don't think there'll be a show tomorrow, but there will be a show on Sunday, probably 2 p.m. East Coast time, maybe 3. I'm not sure exactly. We'll see. It'll be about Trump being the worst negotiator in the world. I'll repeat a lot of what I've said over the last year. 8 years. But it'll be fun. I promise it'll be fun. I'll have examples, lots of them. Yeah, join us for that. What else? Monday, we'll have a show. Tuesday, probably no show. Monday, there'll be 2 shows. News, early, and then there'll be the interview with Christina in the evening. So please join us for all of that. I will see you. Have a great weekend. I intend to. I hope it doesn't rain so we can go to the beach. But if it does rain, we won't go to the beach. We'll figure it out. We'll have a good time either way. Talk to you soon. Bye, everybody.